Welcome to the best time of the whole week, Saturday morning. The rush of the workaday world is in the past. Monday still hasn't reared its ugly head. And this is the one day you can just sit back and relax, if even for just a moment. And one of the ways I love to relax on Saturday morning is with a nice, hot, frothy cappuccino. Somehow, through divine providence, no doubt, you have stumbled into this little corner of the internet and have discovered this podcast, Saturday Cappuccino with the Saints. Because after all, who better to share a cup of coffee with than one of the uncountable number of saints from our tradition? Each week, we set aside a little bit of time to discuss the saint of the week, or two. Some weeks are packed, as well as explore any major festivals of the Christian tradition coming up or just celebrated. I've always been a history nerd, and church history, especially with the stories and lives of the saints, are a continual source of inspiration. I hope you enjoy this little respite from the normal grind. And now, sit back, pour yourself a nice frothy cappuccino or the drink of your choice. Don't worry, no one checks. And enjoy. And don't forget to like and subscribe to this channel if you want to continue to see our content. And remember to hit the notification bell to be alerted to new videos. And so now, on to this week's episode. This week, Saturday Cappuccino with the Saints will commemorate one of the most amazing supernatural episodes to occur in modern times, the miracle of the sun that took place on October 13th, 1917. This miracle was witnessed by over 70,000 people that day in Fatima, Portugal, and is one of the most well-documented supernatural events in recent history. Its impact continues to reverberate now, and it is a fascinating story. We're also going to continue our study of the angels, and this week we are going to explore the biblical concept of the divine council. It's going to really be mind-blowing, so get ready. So many passages from the Old Testament refer to the divine throne and the spiritual beings which surround it. And how are we as modern people meant to interpret these images? Well, we're going to explore this concept this week. It's going to be challenging and mysterious, and it's an intriguing concept, but this week promises to be quite an eye-opening experience, so you won't want to miss it. So this might be a 2-cup day, so get ready. The first thing we're going to talk about is this event, the Miracle of the Sun, whose anniversary we're going to celebrate this week on October 13th. And it really goes back to the series of Marian apparitions that occurred in Fatima, Portugal in 1917, beginning in May, on May 13th. In 1917, in Fatima, Portugal, 3 shepherd children, Lucia dos Santos and her cousins Francisco and Jacinta Marto, reported a series of Marian apparitions that would captivate the whole world, beginning on May 13th and continuing monthly through October, which is the anniversary of the Miracle of the Sun, which we're celebrating today. The children claimed to see a radiant woman who identified herself as the Lady of the Rosary. Her messages emphasized prayer, penance, and devotion, and included 3 prophetic visions, which we'll talk about. So I have a little video that'll get us kind of up to speed, and this promises to be a very interesting episode. You know, so many people, I mean, this is well known in the Catholic world, but in the rest of the Christian world, it isn't as well known. And, you know, this is an event that was witnessed by 70,000 people just a little over 100 years ago. Well documented, so you should know about it. It's pretty fascinating, so stay tuned.
Of all the apparitions of the Blessed Virgin Mary, none has so captivated the world as her appearance to 3 children at Fatima in Portugal in 1917. The 3 children were Lucia dos Santos and her cousins Jacinta and Francisco Marto. They were poor and had little education. Yet one day, while they were tending sheep, they found themselves conversing with an angel. The angel taught them how to grow in their practice of prayer, and he encouraged them to make sacrifices. He seemed to be preparing them for some great task. The nature of that task became clearer on May 13th of that year, when the children were visited by a lady who was luminous, brighter than the sun, they said, with a light that was purer than crystal. Her message to the children was much like the message they heard from the angel. She urged them to pray and do penance. The children agreed among themselves not to tell anyone about their heavenly visitors. But Jacinta let slip with her mother, and soon, well, the whole village knew. Then word spread beyond the village. Crowds began to gather around the children on the 13th day of each month, the day the lady regularly appeared. Portugal, like many countries during that time, was experiencing a heavy-handed wave of secularization. Revolutionary movements throughout Europe sought to weaken the church's influence, and they did this through law, propaganda, and even state-sponsored bullying. As reports of the apparitions went abroad, well, local officials were embarrassed. They forced the children to undergo harsh interrogations and even jailed them for a time. The local clergy were hardly more supportive, and many people feared that the apparitions were a hoax perpetrated by one or another political party. On the 13th day of one month, the clergy worked with the civil authorities to actually hijack the children on their way to the place where they customarily saw the lady. But no one could deny the change that was taking place in the lives of Lucia, Jacinta, and Francisco. They got serious about prayer, and they undertook severe fasting and other traditional means of penance. They imposed spiritual order and discipline on their daily life. So their personal conversion made their witness credible to the world. And indeed, the world was taking notice. American and European newspapers stationed reporters in Fatima to track the progress of the story. The apparitions even made it to the front pages of the faraway New York Times. Now, the details of the story were sometimes sensational, but they were true. The lady had given the children certain messages they could share with the world, and others they were to keep secret. Now, speculation ran wild about the content of the three secrets, which were gradually divulged over the next 83 years. What are the secrets of Fatima? The first was a vision of hell, which inspired the children to greater penance for the conversion of sinners. The second secret was about evangelization. The Blessed Virgin called for the consecration of Russia to her Immaculate Heart and asked Catholics to make a communion of reparation on the first Saturday of every month. Now, the third secret was kept under wraps until the turn of the millennium. It included an apocalyptic vision of history as it was about to unfold. Pope Benedict XVI said it was primarily about the suffering of the Church. Its message, then, is perennial as much as it was particular. When asked about the hidden secret of Fatima, Pope St. John Paul II would take out his own rosary and tell people that this is the secret of Fatima. The visionaries at Fatima foresaw the great trials of the 20th century, like the rise of communism and the horrors of the world wars. But their secret is still relevant, and it's there in plain sight. It's prayer. It's the way we draw close to Jesus in the mysteries of the Rosary.
That was a nice overview of the Fatima apparitions. But one of the things that was brought up, and I'm going to talk about for a few minutes at least, is about these three secrets. I mean, the oceans of ink that have been spilled, and the forests of trees that have been chopped down to create books about these three secrets is phenomenal. I mean, just type in Secrets of Fatima, and you could spend the rest of the month just going to all kinds of wildly speculative websites, and I mean there are entire podcasts devoted just to this topic. They go on for years. So I'm gonna be brave. And I thought the best way to do it is to actually read what the actual secrets were. They are written down. So we're going to start with the first one next. Here is the first secret written in Lucia's own hand. Our Lady showed us a great sea of fire, which seemed to be under the earth. Plunged in this fire were demons and souls in human form, like transparent burning embers, all blackened and burnished bronze, floating about in conflagration, now raised into the air by the flames that issued from within themselves, together with great clouds of smoke, now falling back on every side, like sparks in a huge fire, without weight or equilibrium, and amid shrieks and groans of pain and despair, which horrified us and made us tremble with fear. The demons could be distinguished by their terrifying and repulsive likeness to frightful and unknown arrivals, all black and transparent. The vision lasted but an instant. How can we ever be grateful enough to our kindly Heavenly Mother, who had already prepared us by promising in the first apparition to take us to heaven? Otherwise, I think we would have died of fear and terror. So that's the first secret. And this is the second secret. You've seen hell where the souls of the poor sinners go. To save them, God wishes to establish in the world devotion to my Immaculate Heart. If what I say to you is done, many souls will be saved and there will be peace. The war is going to end. This is World War I, by the way. But if people do not cease offending God, a worse one will break out during the pontificate of Pope Pius XI, who wasn't Pope yet, by the way. When you see a night illumined by an unknown light, know that this is the great sign given you by God, that he is about to punish the world for its crimes, by means of war, famine, and persecutions of the Church and of the Holy Father. To prevent this, I shall come to ask for the consecration of Russia to my Immaculate Heart and the communion of reparation on the first Saturdays. If my requests are heeded, Russia will be converted, and there will be peace. If not, she will spread her errors throughout the world, causing wars and persecutions of the Church. The good will be martyred. The Holy Father will have much to suffer. Various nations will be annihilated. In the end, my Immaculate Heart will triumph. The Holy Father will consecrate Russia to me, and she shall be converted, and a period of peace will be granted to the world. Just remember, Russia at this time, this occurred in 1917, was just undergoing the Communist Revolution. So the Tsar was overthrown in 1917. The communist state formed in Russia in 1917. So that's World War I was raging at this time. Portugal was, I don't think it was involved really, but it was definitely the main event of 1917. So that's a little bit of the background of what was going on when the second secret was given to the children. An interesting thing about this second secret, which has gotten a lot of study about this particular secret, because you can trace it to subsequent events. Part of the secret talked about you will see a light in the sky, and that will be a sign that a worse war will come. Well, there was such a sign. It occurred over a period of time from January 25th to 26th in 1938. It was a geomagnetic storm, and the Northern Lights, which normally you can only see close to the poles, were seen throughout the world, but especially in Europe, as far south as Spain and Portugal and southern Italy. And when the secret was read, people said, I wonder if this is the sign. Well, this is 1938. Well, World War II, which, trust me, was truly a worse war than World War I, and World War I was pretty terrible, started the very next year. Now, there's very little debate about what the first two secrets are about. The first secret was a vision of hell and about repenting and turning back to God. The second secret, it's almost universally accepted, is a prophecy of the coming of World War II, especially when you consider the sign in the sky, the red sky, that was going to be the sign that the war was about to break out, and about the consecration of Russia. So those are the first two secrets. Most of the books that you will see out there on Amazon, if you type in "Secrets of Fatima," they're almost all about the third secret, which is very mysterious because there's a debate, and the debate is: has the prophecy of the third secret happened yet? Is it still to happen? Is it a prophecy of the end of the world? Is it a prophecy of something that's already occurred? And the debate has been raging for a long time. So I'm just going to read the secret. Sister Lucia, she became a nun later in her life, wrote a letter to the bishop about the third secret, and here's what she wrote. The secret was given to her and the other children on July 13th, 1917. And here's what she wrote. I write in obedience to you, my God, who command me to do this through His Excellency the Bishop of Leiria, and through your most holy mother and mine. After the two parts which I had already explained, at the left of Our Lady and a little above, we saw an angel with a flaming sword in his left hand. Flashing, it gave out flames that looked as though they would set the world on fire. But they died out in contact with the splendor that Our Lady radiated towards him from her right hand. Pointing to the earth with his right hand, the angel cried out in a loud voice, "Penance, penance, penance." And we saw an immense light, that is God, something similar to how people appear in a mirror when they pass in front of it, a bishop dressed in white. We had the impression that it was the Holy Father. Other bishops, priests, men and women, religious, going up a steep mountain. At the top of it, there was a big cross of rough-hewn trunks as of a cork tree, with the bark. Before reaching there, the Holy Father passed through a big city, half in ruins and half trembling with halting step. Afflicted with pain and sorrow, he prayed for the souls of the corpses he met on the way. Having reached the top of the mountain, on his knees at the big front of the big cross, he was killed by a group of soldiers who fired bullets and arrows at him. And in the same way there died, one after another, the other bishops, priests, men and women religious, and various lay people of different ranks and positions. Beneath the two arms of the cross, there were two angels, each with a crystal aspergillium in his hand, in which they gathered up the blood of the martyrs, and with it sprinkled the souls that were making their way to God. So that's the third secret, and you can see that it's a controversial secret, and people have been debating what that's all about ever since. When the secret was released to the public, it had been in the church hierarchy for decades. But when the secret was released to the public after so much speculation, I mean, around the turn of the century, back in the year 2000, there was a slew of books about the third secret, and has it been revealed, and is it some sort of apocalyptic warning of the end of the world? And it was released. It did, by the way, when the secret was released, it didn't dissuade anybody. It only fueled the flames of speculation. But Pope Benedict, who was Cardinal Ratzinger still, he hadn't been Pope yet, been made Pope yet, came out and said that the secret is not about the end of the world, but it is about, or that things are fixed in stone. But this is a prophecy that is meant to help us change our trajectory that we're on. I don't know whether that's just him trying to put a good spin on it or what he thought about it, but that's one take on it. Another pope had, I think, a different take. His predecessor, Pope John Paul II, never really publicly spoke on the third secret. It hadn't been released yet during most of his pontificate. But he did kind of indicate, I think, by his actions, what he thought the third secret was about. And he thought the third secret was about the assassination attempt on himself, which occurred. This is, again, I'm not one to believe in coincidences. So this seems like too weird not to be a coincidence. But the assassination attempt on Pope John Paul II occurred on May 13th, 1981, which is the anniversary of the first Fatima apparition. Now, he immediately, shortly thereafter, once he got out of the hospital, he took the bullet that almost killed him, and he embedded it in the crown of Our Lady of Fatima in Portugal. In fact, if you go to Fatima, Portugal, you can see the crown that they have on the statue. And in the crown, you can see it there on the right, is the bullet that almost killed Pope John Paul II. So he never really said this directly, but I think he thought the third secret with the man in white that the children thought was the Holy Father, and somebody tried to kill him or did kill him, that this was a prophecy about the possible assassination attempt on Pope John Paul II. And because he survived the attempt, he gave the credit to Our Lady of Fatima for guiding the bullet to not kill him. This isn't one of the secrets of Fatima, but I think it's something we should take to mind and take heed of, because this is something Sister Lucia wrote years later in the I think it was in the 60s. I mean, she was a nun for the rest of her life. She just died, I think, in the 90s. I mean, she was a very old woman when she died, and she's been made into a saint. But this is what she wrote about one of the messages that Our Lady of Fatima gave her. The final battle between the Lord and the reign of Satan will be about marriage and the family. Don't be afraid, because anyone who works for the sanctity of marriage and the family will always be fought and opposed in every way, because this is the decisive issue. However, Our Lady has already crushed its head. Now, I can't help but think, now she wrote this back in the 60s. I can't help but think that when you see the controversy now that's raging through our society about gender and marriage and things of that nature, and how that's being used as a club to attack the church, I sometimes wonder, is this what Our Lady was prophesying? It's an interesting thought. This is a picture of Fatima today. This is the basilica there at Fatima, Portugal. Fatima, Portugal, by the way, is out in the middle of nowhere. I mean, it is not on the beaten path, but it is an enormous pilgrimage site, and millions of people come to Fatima every year. It's really a fantastic place to visit. I highly recommend it. It's quite an impressive sight. And I know this from my own experience, because I think it was about 10 years ago, my wife and I went to Fatima and visited, and it was a very moving experience. There's a place where you go where people will light candles and pray for healing. And we were there, I think it was in April. It wasn't during one of the major, festivals around Fatima, so it was not hugely attended, but there was a constant flow of people there at Fatima. And if you get a chance to go to Fatima, Portugal, and see this place, you'll be moved. We certainly were. And if you're looking for a good movie that the whole family can sit down and watch, I would recommend one of my favorite movies, The Miracle of Our Lady of Fatima from 1952. It has aged well. It's a great movie. Not a lot of special effects. I mean, they're special effects, but they're like 1952 special effects. So you might have to adjust some of your CGI soaked expectations. But it's really well done. It's a very moving movie, and it's something the whole family can enjoy. But the finale of the Miracle of Our Lady of Fatima uh, addresses the main thing why we're talking about this today. This event that occurred on October 13th, 1917, the Miracle of the Sun, and it's an amazing event. And in the little video that I'm going to show next, um, there's an interview that they had with one of the people that was there. This was done in the 50s, I believe. It's a TV interview. The guy was a child during the Miracle of the Sun, but he talks about what he experienced, and he experienced it along with, like I said, 70,000 other people. It's an amazing story, and it's an amazing event that's so well documented, and yet for a good portion of the world, it's just like completely ignored. I don't think it should be ignored. I think it's a topic that needs to be discussed. So here's a little video clip of an interview about somebody who actually was there during the Miracle of the Sun. It's really interesting.
When we get on the cover, I see the soldiers try to stop us to get down in the cover. Everything was wet. It was a good three inches of water and mud, everything in the ground. I was, I say, between 7,500 feet from the hill and from the tree.
Around noontime, they saw some change in the atmosphere. They could see that something different was happening. Lucia shouted, "Look at the sky!" And that was when the miracle of the sun began.
It began to whirl.
And the sun started breaking. And then the sun started roll, like dancing from one place to another place. And then we see the sun come towards where the shield and where the tree. And we see the sun come right into the tree. And the sun, about a minute or so, and the sun started rolling back again the way it came in.
My God! My God!
Everybody started howling, cry. Some started to confess himself. Even my mother grabbed myself when he squeezed me to her and he started crying. That's the end of the world. The wind started to blow pretty hard, real hard. But the ground was dry just like it was exploded. And then our clothes, we don't feel at all. The clothes dry. And we look out, we was clean, just clean. The clothes come from the laundry. I can get it out of my mind. That was a miracle, a real miracle.
We're going to end our discussion of the Miracle of the Sun today with the prayer that Our Lady taught to the children in Fatima. And it's prayed, I'm sure, every day by millions of people. And I pray it every day myself. It's a good prayer, and a good prayer for today. Oh my Jesus, forgive us our sins. Save us from the fires of hell, and lead all souls to heaven, especially those in most need of thy mercy. Amen. We're going to continue our study of angels, and this week we're going to get into a really interesting topic, the divine council. that Michael Heiser, who you see pictured here, who died a couple of years ago, was the one who really got me clued into this amazing idea. And here's the thing that I just find both interesting and tragic at the same time. It really, this whole concept of the divine counsel showing up in the Old Testament has really opened my eyes to a way to read the Old Testament that I just never had before. And you can go your whole life going to church. You can go to numerous Bible studies for years. You can go to seminary, okay, and never once hear anybody talk about this. It's almost like this whole idea, which whether you believe it's true or not is almost irrelevant, because it seems apparent that the people in the Old Testament times believed this. And that's how they read the Bible, and that's how they wrote it. So understanding their worldview of thinking about these things this way really changes the way that you read the Old Testament, and frankly has made a lot more sense to me. And part of this study of angels that I think one of the goals I have for it is to at least open people's minds to this idea that that's right there in the text. It's something that's been hidden in plain sight. And for that, I will be always grateful to Dr. Michael Heiser and his book, The Unseen Realm, and recapturing the supernatural in the church, and various things that I've seen that he's done on YouTube and books that he's written. Really did great work to open this up to a wider audience other than just some sort of obscure Bible scholar community. So we're going to start off our discussion of the Divine Council with one of my favorite groups. You're going to see them a lot, the Bible Project, and they did a wonderful little video to kind of introduce us to this topic before we delve into it at greater depth. So next up is the Bible Project.
For most of human history, people have believed in some kind of spiritual realm that exists alongside the world as we know it.
Right, and the biblical authors are no exception.
Yeah, for them, the spiritual realm is a different kind of realm than ours. And to highlight that difference, the Bible refers to God's space as the sky or the heavens.
Because the sky is really different from the land. It's above and beyond. And up there are shiny bodies that move around. I think of these as flaming gas balls.
But when the biblical authors looked up, the stars gave them a way to talk and think about spiritual beings. In the Bible, they're called the sons of God, or the rulers and authorities, or even sometimes the divine council.
So that sounds really important. What does the divine council do?
Well, they're introduced in Genesis chapter 1, where they're called the host of heaven, that is, the sun, moon, and stars. And there, they're also called signs, meaning that their power and status symbolizes and points to God's power and status.
Yeah, so in Genesis 1, God appoints them to rule over the day and night.
Exactly. And then later in the Bible, we're told that they were celebrating God's power and creativity when he created the world.
Like the cheering section of a game.
Yeah, right. There are also stories in the Bible where God invites the divine council to participate in making a decision. Like when they help decide how to bring down the corrupt Israelite King Ahab. Or in the book of Job, where they debate God's policy of rewarding people who do good.
So they're like God's staff team. But why does God need a team? If he's powerful enough to create the whole universe, he could surely rule it without any help.
Well, he doesn't need them. But apparently, the God of the Bible wants to share authority with others.
Oh, right. God shares his rule with human partners on Earth. And so, in the same way, there's a parallel story of God sharing his authority to rule with spiritual partners.
Yes, that is, until it all falls apart in a twin rebellion. So you have humans who want to rule on Earth on their own terms. So they start building their own nation using their own definitions of good and evil.
Yeah, the famous story of the building of Babylon.
But check this out. When biblical authors like Moses or Isaiah looked back at the origins of Babylon, they saw more than just a human rebellion, but also a spiritual rebellion.
What was this spiritual rebellion?
Well, there were members of the divine council who, like the humans, didn't want to represent God's authority anymore. They wanted to be God, and they rebelled. And so these created beings deceived humans into worshiping them instead of the Creator. And so Babylon becomes the biblical image for the combined human and spiritual rebellion.
And so God scatters the people from Babylon into different nations.
And in the book of Deuteronomy, Moses says this is when God also scattered the rebels of the divine council with them.
So the nations are handed over to spiritual rulers.
Yes, and this is why when the biblical prophets look out at the violent empires of their day, they see two dimensions to all the chaos and injustice. Human rebels who are being corrupted by the worship of spiritual rebels, the idol gods of money, sex, and military power.
Yeah, when humans give their allegiance to these powers, it leads to a world like ours.
Right, and the best example of this is the story of the Exodus, where we're told that the Egyptian genocide of the Israelites was inspired by Pharaoh and by the gods of Egypt.
That's really intense.
But it's not the end of the story. When God rescued the Israelites from Egypt and its gods, he invited them to become his covenant partners and learn a different way of ruling the world.
And they agree to it, but in the end they don't honor the partnership. They give their allegiance to other gods.
And so this leads to their exile in Babylon, where they become slaves once again to a foreign nation and their spiritual rulers, awaiting a new exodus into freedom. And this is where the story of Jesus picks up. He said he was here to rescue the world and take it back from the rebels.
Which rebels? The human ones or the spiritual ones?
Exactly. For Jesus, it was all connected. When he marched into Jerusalem for Passover, he was announcing the ultimate exodus. He was there to confront and overcome all rebel powers and authorities, and he did it by giving up his life.
So this is what the Apostle Paul meant when he said that Jesus disarmed the powers and authorities, triumphing over them by the cross.
Yes, Jesus condemned our evil by allowing the rebels to unleash all their hate and evil on him. But then he overcame it with the power of his love and resurrection life. And then Jesus told his followers that all authority in heaven and earth now belongs to him.
Now, the ultimate human and divine partner. This is really good news.
Yeah, and it's why the apostles started inviting everyone to give their allegiance to the risen Jesus, to discover freedom and a new way to be human.
Now, while Jesus gained a decisive victory over the rebel powers, he didn't destroy them. They're still around, causing problems.
Yes, and in fact, they are the problem. The apostles said that humanity's real enemy is never another human. Rather, it's the spiritual powers that animate our cultural idols that inspire hatred, division, and violence.
So when I see people hurting other people, behind it is the divine council gone rogue. How do you deal with this kind of enemy?
Well, the Apostle Paul said we can resist by putting on the character traits of Jesus like armor, faithfulness, justice, and peace. And he said that our only weapon is the Word of God. That is, the biblical story of good news that Jesus has overcome all rebels with the divine power of his life and love.
Now, we're not used to thinking in terms of a host of other spiritual beings in the throne room of God, some of them rebelling, some of them not. That's just, if you're a modern Christian, that's just not an idea that's in your head. But that is the idea, okay, behind the divine council, and it's the idea that was the main idea for most of Christian history. It definitely was the idea for most of Israel's history. And you could see hints of it right in plain sight that you may have read 1,000 times and it didn't register with you. But I'm going to ask you to read it with fresh eyes. So I'm going to read the opening lines of Psalm 82 and just hear what it's being said and think about how did you reconcile this before. I've read this psalm 1,000 times probably before I'd ever heard of the divine council, and it never struck me. It's like I thought I must be interpreting this wrong. So here we go. God presides in the great assembly. He renders judgment among the gods. I said, you are gods. You are all the sons of the Most High. But you will die like mere mortals. You will fall like every other ruler. Now, when you read that, the clear sense reading of this is that God is in an assembly with other spiritual beings, lowercase g gods. They're all sons of the Most High, but they're created beings and they will die like mortals. I've read where some people will interpret this psalm as God is talking to people and referring to people, like holy people, as being like God. Well, that doesn't make sense when you look at line 7 and it says, but you will die like mere mortals. You will fall like every other ruler. I mean, if you're a person, if you're a human being, that's not news. We know that. But this thing that God is saying to his council, to the rebel members of the council, that they will die like mere mortals, only makes sense if you understand that this group of beings that God is addressing are spiritual beings. So it's been right there in the text. You've read it probably in church a bunch of times. But now reading it through this lens of the divine council, it makes a little bit more sense. Here's another psalm that only makes sense when interpreted through this divine council worldview. Psalm 89, and I'll read it. The heavens praise your wonders, Lord, your faithfulness too, in the assembly of the holy ones. For who in the skies above can compare with the Lord? Who is like the Lord among the heavenly beings? In the council of the holy ones, God is greatly feared. He is more awesome than all who surround him. So he's not talking to people. He's not talking to, priests and rulers of Israel. One, they don't live in the skies, and they are not going to be even thought of to be on the same level. This only makes sense if he is addressing members of the divine council. So there's yet another example. There's a bunch of them in the Bible that you've seen a bunch of times, but you didn't realize, or just because you're just programmed to just not see it, that it's actually referring to this idea. Here's another story that kind of is part of the same idea of the divine council. It comes from the book of Job, and I'll read it. This is from Job chapter 1, verses 7 to 9. Where have you come from? Said the Lord to Satan. From roaming through the earth, he replied, and walking back and forth in it. Then the Lord said to Satan, have you considered my servant Job? For there is no one on earth like him, a man who is blameless and upright, who fears God and shuns evil. Satan answered the Lord, does Job fear God for nothing? And then the passage goes on with the infamous bet that God and Satan have. But just think about this for a minute. God is having a conversation with a spiritual being, Satan, in the Bible, and they're conversing about a human being on earth. That's part of this idea of the divine council. Again, it doesn't make sense if you don't have that understanding of the divine council. Obviously, Satan is on the divine council. He is part of God's quote unquote staff team, at least at this point. And that's what's so interesting about this story. If you read the book of Job and how Satan is interacting in the story, compared to in the New Testament, Jesus and his interaction with the devil or Satan, it's a lot different. Satan, in this case, seems like he's working for God. I mean, he's part of God's team, so to speak. That is so mind-blowing because we're not used to thinking of that. But it does go back to this idea of the divine council, and it also goes back to something that probably thousands, millions of Christians have misinterpreted for decades, centuries even, including myself. The word Satan. You notice that he's referred to as the Satan. A lot of people think, and I thought, that Satan was like a proper name. Well, Satan is not a proper name. It's a title. And that's very, very important here. In Hebrew, it's ha-satan, which gets translated into English as the Satan. And what the Satan means is the adversary. The closest explanation I could come up with like, what does this mean, the adversary? He's like God's prosecuting attorney, at least in the book of Job, that his job as part of the divine council is to be the accuser, the adversary, the Department of Justice. And that's really a paradigm shift. Now, you'll see it changes over time, but that's, at least in the book of Job, what this means. By the time you get to the New Testament, the Satan has kind of been truncated to just Satan, and he has taken on more of the characteristics that we know and understand in our common understanding of Satan today. But it was an evolution from the early idea of ha-satan, the adversary, which was sort of a neutral character. I mean, he was definitely an adversary, but he wasn't necessarily the focus of all evil in the universe. To by the time you get to Jesus and you get to his temptation in the desert and whatnot, it's apparent that he is the chief adversary of mankind and the chief adversary of God. So there was a change that happened from the time of Job. And Job, traditionally, some scholars there's a debate about this. When was Job written? When did Job happen? Well, some scholars believe Job is actually the oldest book of the Bible, that it predates the writing of Genesis, that it predates Moses. There's no real way to tell, but it definitely has an echo of a very early understanding, okay, of the divine council and the character of the Satan, and then how that changed over time to, by the time you get to the New Testament, it's a different concept. Here's some more divine council language in the book of Job. Job chapter 15, verse 15, referring to God. He says, "Behold, he puts no trust in his holy ones. Yes, the heavens are not clean in his sight." Now, think about what's being said here. In this sense, holy ones is referring to, we kind of have holy as interchangeable with good. Okay, that's not what holy was meaning in this context. Holy was meaning set aside or set apart or special. Okay, these divine beings, these other spiritual beings in the divine council. And then it goes on to say, yes, the heavens are not clean in his sight, which is an indication that some of these divine beings or spiritual beings in the divine council are not holy, are not good, that they are rebellious, which again fits right in with this divine council worldview. One of the most enigmatic and mysterious sayings of Jesus in the whole Bible, or at least in my opinion, it comes from Luke chapter 10, verse 18. And he's referring to Satan, and Jesus said to them, "I was watching Satan fall from heaven like lightning." Now, the first question I would have about this is, well, when was that? Because what that seems to indicate, a clear sense reading of this, is that Satan was in the divine council near to the throne of God and working as part of God's staff team. And then he fell from heaven like lightning. And he's no longer in that role in the divine council. He's still a divine being, or he's still a spiritual being of immense power. But he fell. So when did that happen? Did that happen at the beginning, before the Garden of Eden? Did that happen at the Garden of Eden? Did that happen when Jesus was born? I mean, I've heard multiple theories about this. And there's no way to prove one right or one wrong. But it is interesting that this clearly says that this Satan character, the Satan, was part of the divine council, part of being in heaven with the other beings close to God. And at some point, he fell from heaven like lightning, and Jesus, maybe in his incarnate, pre-incarnate, manifestation as the Word of God from all eternity, saw it happen. So just a very, very intriguing verse in the Bible. By the time you get around to the book of Revelation, the end of the Bible, you'll see the transformation is complete. And in verse 20, verse 2, it says, and he laid hold on the dragon, that old serpent, which is the devil and Satan, and bound him 1,000 years. So this character is no longer part of God's staff team. He's still a spiritual being, but he is definitely the complete adversary at this point. I'm just going to put this in your memory bank for thinking about later when we talk about dragons and serpent. That's going to come up probably in the next couple weeks. But that imagery of dragon, serpent with the devil and Satan, it's not all just metaphorical. There's a reason for that, and it's very intriguing. So you'll see this come up again. I don't want to get too waylaid about talking about the Satan. There'll be much more about him later, but this is just a little teaser of things to come. One of the probably best known scenes in the entire Bible that talks about the divine council and the throne and the presence of God comes from the incredibly mysterious book of Isaiah, specifically Isaiah chapter 6. And it's difficult, I'm going to be honest with you, as a modern person, to read Isaiah 6 and make sense of all this imagery. But I think if we use a little of our skills that we're building up here as we delve into these angels and trying to understand the symbology, it'll make a little bit more sense. But I'm going to go ahead and read this passage, probably one of the most famous passages about someone being in the presence of God's throne room, and it comes from Isaiah 6. In the year of King Uzziah's death, I saw the Lord sitting on a throne, lofty and exalted, with the train of his robe filling the temple. Seraphim stood above him, each having 6 wings. With 2 he covered his face, with 2 he covered his feet, and with 2 he flew. And one called out to another and said, Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is the fullness of his glory. And the foundations of the thresholds trembled at the voice of him who called out, while the temple was filling with smoke. Then I heard the voice of the Lord saying, Whom shall I send, and who will go for us? Then I said, Here I am, send me. So that's the passage, and you're probably all going, what in the world? How do we process that? Well, stay tuned.
Psalm 82 places the heavenly host in a council. That term is appropriate because these beings participate in God's rule of the world. Now, certainly God doesn't need their help, but he lets them participate. Consider the strange story that the prophet Micaiah gave to the wicked Israelite king Ahab.
Therefore, hear the word of Yahweh. I saw Yahweh sitting on his throne, with all the hosts of heaven standing beside him, from his right hand and from his left hand. And Yahweh said, Who will entice Ahab, so that he will go up and fall at Ramoth Gilead? Then this one was saying one thing, and the other one was saying another. Then a spirit came out and stood before Yahweh and said, I will entice him. And Yahweh said to him, How? He said, I will go out, and I will be a false spirit in the mouth of all his prophets. And he said, You shall entice and succeed. Go out and do so. So then, see that Yahweh has placed a false spirit in the mouth of all these your prophets, and Yahweh has spoken disaster concerning you.
Did you catch what the Bible asked you to believe? God meets with his heavenly host to decide what happens on earth. These beings, the gods of the council, are spirits, not people or idols.
Remember, Yahweh, the God of Israel, is an Elohim, a spirit being. But no other Elohim is him. He is one of a kind. He is the true God with a capital G. He alone is the perfect sovereign creator. He is the Most High God. Now, Psalm 82:6 says God has sons. Sons of the Most High is the phrase.
I have said, You are gods, and sons of the Most High, all of you.
Who are these sons of God? It sounds odd. What about Jesus? How can there be all these other sons of God? The answer is found in verses like John 3:16, where Jesus is described as the unique Son of God. Now, some translations say only begotten, but the word actually means unique, one of a kind. How is Jesus unique? The New Testament says he is God, the one uncreated God in the flesh. None of the other sons of God fit that description.
The sons of God language made sense to ancient people. God was king, and kings assigned their sons high-ranking jobs in their government. So it is in the unseen realm. It's important because the sonship language reminds us that God wants a family. His family extends to both the unseen world and to earth, and those two families come together in Eden.
God addressed his counsel when he created the first man and woman. The counsel was already there.
So God created humankind in his image. In the likeness of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them.
God told his heavenly family he wanted to create humanity. Now, people often think God addressed the other members of the Trinity, but that is not the case. The other members of the Trinity are co-equal and co-omniscient. God wouldn't need to tell them anything. God speaks to his heavenly host here. Job 38 tells us the sons of God were present at the creation.
Where were you at my laying the foundation of the earth? When the morning stars were singing together, and all of the sons of God shouted for joy.
The image of God concept helps us to understand how humans and the heavenly host are both like God. Both of God's families represent him. The supernatural sons of God represent him in the unseen realm, and we represent God on earth.
Now, many of us, when we read passages like this in the Bible, and it's just too weird. I mean, it's just too weird to take seriously. And we either completely dismiss it as a complete metaphor, or just it's like ancient, Bronze Age people, and that's how they talked. And we just gloss over these stories in the Bible, and we don't take them seriously, or we go down another road entirely that has been a major source of conflict for decades now. I love movies, and I can't help making references. This is a still from one of my favorite movies, Inherit the Wind, with Spencer Tracy playing Clarence Darrow. I don't know the actor playing William Jennings Bryan, but he was fantastic in it as well. And for you trivia-minded people, look at the judge. You recognize him? That's Harry Morgan, who played Colonel Potter from MASH. or Sergeant Friday's sidekick in Dragnet. So that didn't mean to divert, but I just love movie trivia. But this movie in particular, illustrates a conflict that's going on. I think it's a tragic conflict that's based on huge misunderstandings on both sides of fundamentalism versus total secular materialists. There are people, and the actor portraying William Jennings Bryan, kind of taking the fundamentalist worldview that if the Bible says that the earth was created in 7 days, then 7 days it is, and the earth is only 4,000 years old, and all that, and then Spencer Tracy playing Clarence Darrow, really hammering him, and then the big culmination scene comes with so that first day. Do you think it was a 24-hour day, or do you think it might have been 25 hours? And William Jennings Bryan just kind of stumbles a little bit, and then Spencer Tracy's character jumps all over that and says, well, if it could be in 25 hours, maybe it's 25 million years, and on and on. It was a great movie, but it really illustrates what I think is a false debate. Now, I'm not a young earth creationist by any stretch of the imagination. Now, but I do take the Bible seriously. And I think a lot of times a lot of it comes from the fact that we are reading the Bible. Even the fundamentalists are reading the Bible essentially through the time frame that they live in. And we miss a lot of the language problems and the problems that come from there being a distance in time I talked about before. And they go right over it. And a lot of these passages, like the throne room scene in Isaiah, fill this category, because we see all these images and all these things being talked about, the throne room and the seraphim and the wings, and we just, our brain shut off, and you either fall into the category of, yep, that's exactly what it means, it's exactly what it would have been like, or it's all a metaphor and it's all nonsense, it's all fairy tales. Well, I think there's a problem with both worldviews, and part of it comes from we don't understand how language works, and how language and things that are being referred to in one time period can be misinterpreted later. Here's a couple of good examples. If you ever get into a debate with somebody that says, I take the Bible literally. Well, I take the Bible literally too, but I understand when a metaphor is a metaphor, and when something is to be taken literally means to be literally. And if you don't make a distinction, then you are not reading it properly. You are de facto misinterpreting it. I'll give you a perfect example. Jesus said that he was the door. Now, does that mean that he turned into a door? That Jesus had a doorknob on him and people would walk through him? No, of course not. He is using that as a metaphor, okay, for it's only through him that you can be saved. We understand that, and we do that ourselves. In the upper right-hand corner, if somebody says, you've got the key to my heart. Now, we know what that means, okay? There's no question about that. How's that going to hold up over time? I'm not so sure. By the way, it's not just religious people that have these kind of metaphors. Science has these kind of metaphors too. In the bottom left-hand corner, you'll see the Big Bang. There's a couple things that we definitely know about the Big Bang is it wasn't a bang. There was no big explosion because space didn't exist yet. It was all expanding into it. It was creating space. But in order to make a complex idea understandable to regular people, the term Big Bang, which I think originally was meant to kind of be a dismissive term, but it kind of stuck, is the way most people will refer to it. So if I talk about the Big Bang, you know what I'm talking about. In the world of economics, if I said, The bulls are running wild on Wall Street. Well, am I talking about some sort of agricultural event that got out of hand up in New York, or am I referring to the stock market? So these kind of metaphors that we use all the time, well, guess what? People in the ancient world use those kind of metaphors of their own all the time as well in order to make things understandable to each other. So we need to just have a little humility about language and how we use it and how it was used then. And we also have to have a little humility about how our concepts of how the cosmos looks, like the Big Bang, for example. Well, how's that going to look in 3,000 years? I guarantee you it's going to be different. New discoveries will come about that'll change our way of understanding things materially and scientifically, to where the Big Bang is going to look just as ludicrous as the dome in heaven does to us now. So we're no different than people of 3,000 years ago. But remember what the Bible is about. The Bible is not a science manual. The Bible is not a biology manual about how things technically happen. Okay, a Bible is the story of creation from the God and mankind perspective. So don't try to foist your scientific worldview on things and think the Bible is addressing those things, okay, when they're not talking about those things at all. I mean, a classic example you heard in the video we played earlier about how when ancient people looked up in the sky and saw the stars, they were assuming that those were signs of higher spiritual beings, okay? So they will be referring to higher spiritual beings as the stars, like when the morning stars sung at the creation of mankind in the book of Job. That doesn't mean that the fact that we know that those lights up in the sky now are flaming balls of gas, that has nothing to do with whether the reality that the ancient people were referring to when they referred to the stars is true or not. Okay, they were referring to those as signs of some higher reality. That's still what we should be referring to know what the ancient people were talking about. They're not talking about physical stars. They're talking about higher spiritual beings. And that's what makes our Bible, both the Hebrew and obviously the Christian Bible that came from it, different than other religious texts. We believe it's inspired, but we also believe and know it's written by people, in the words of people that have been inspired to write it. It's not channeled, it's not dictated. Moses didn't go into a trance and through automatic writing wrote out the book of Genesis. Paul didn't, lay down his head on his desk and wake up and found that the book of Romans was written, or the letter to the Romans was written. No, he was inspired by the Holy Spirit to write it. And he is going to use, just like people today, if they are inspired to write something, the metaphors, the language, the understanding of the world that they live in materially to express themselves. And so we need to remember that. And that isn't a conflict with whether you believe the Bible is true or not. I believe the Bible is absolutely true. But also know it was written under inspiration by people, okay, to be understood by other people. And as Michael Heiser said, we have to remember the Bible was written for us, but it wasn't written to us. And the Bible was written, most of the stories we're going to be talking about, to people from thousands of years ago. And so you would expect people from thousands of years ago would use examples and metaphors and imagery that would make sense to people thousands of years ago. Last week I talked a great deal about language and the limitations of language, especially the limitation of language and translations over thousands of years. How you really are going on a little trip back in time into a totally foreign culture whenever you read an ancient text. And so you have to be aware of that so you're not bringing your own baggage with you when you go there. And we're going to do a little experiment today, and you're going to be a part of this. So this is my challenge to you, because here's my thesis. Our presuppositions in language and worldview affect dramatically, in ways we can't even imagine, how we perceive and describe reality. Even our own senses, we will describe reality, and we can't help but describe it based on our worldview and our language and our presuppositions. So this is a little experiment we're going to do. Take a long look at this beautiful picture from Greece. Just soak it into your head, and I'm going to give you a little quiz about it. All right, time for the quiz. You remember the picture? I mean, I hope so. It was only about probably 10 seconds ago. What color was the sea in the previous picture? You give up? I mean, I'm sure you probably thought, Paul, we just saw it. We know what it is. It's blue. Okay, you sure about that? Let's check again. All right, here's the picture again. You sticking with blue? Is blue your official? Is that your final answer? All right. Well, I'm going to show you something that may make you think about whether that's the right answer or not. Probably the most famous author of the ancient world, up until the Middle Ages, and probably still today. If you say Greece, you say Homer, the author of the Iliad and the Odyssey. He wrote lots of epic poems. The study of Homer was central to the classical education of almost any well-educated person up until well into the 20th century. So how did Homer, who lived in Greece about 1,000 years BC, he wrote, Greece is surrounded by the sea, so you can't get away from it. You're always within 100 miles of the ocean. How did Homer describe the Mediterranean? Well, here's one of many examples of him talking about the sea, and he says, over the wine dark sea. Now, the picture that I showed you, does that look like wine to you? I mean, unless you're a Boone's Farm fan and you like blueberry wine. That takes me back to high school, and I want to pass that memory away as quickly as possible. But no, it doesn't. Wine is purple. That's blue. And here's the very interesting thing about blue, and it's a good example of what I'm talking about, when your perceptions can really be affected by your culture. There's a very interesting phenomenon that anthropologists have discovered when studying quote-unquote primitive cultures. I'm not casting aspersions on them, but just less sophisticated or non-literate cultures, even today. That a lot of these cultures, in fact, the majority of them, for whatever reason, I'm not exactly sure why, they don't have a word for blue. And because of that, when they test these people, because they don't have a word for blue, they have a problem being able to distinguish blue from other colors. For example, they've had tribesmen that don't have a written language yet, and they just have no word for blue, and they'll show them pictures of the sky, and then they'll show them something that's just pure white, and the sky is blue, and the pure white is obviously not blue, and they say it's the same color. They just can't see the blue. Once blue has been introduced into their culture and they have a word for it, suddenly they're able to perceive blue. So just having a word for things allows your mind, I don't know how this works technically, but it's a phenomenon that's well documented. But just having a word for something allows your mind to be able to perceive it, which I think has a bearing on what we're talking about when we talk about some of these images, okay, from the divine throne room of God. Because here's the thing we could all probably agree on, that the prophet Isaiah and all the other prophets, or anyone who had been, or like John in the book of Revelation, that has been ushered into the throne room of God, is going to see things that are completely unexplainable, never seen on earth. And he'll be unable to describe them because his senses just can't perceive it. I mean, if a culture can not be able to describe the word blue just because they don't have a word for it, well, what about the prophet who's in the throne room of the Most High, where everything he sees is beyond words and beyond descriptions? He's going to come back from this vision, and he's going to try to explain it the best he can. And he's going to use the words and terms that he has available. One thing we know is not going to be what he sees, but it's going to be representative of the idea of what he sees, because what he is actually seeing is indescribable. It's beyond human description. So that's something to remember. But another thing to remember is this, is that, do you trust your own senses? How sophisticated is your own eyesight or your own hearing? We as human beings think pretty highly of ourselves, and we think, well, we are obviously perceiving reality when we look out through our eyes and what is actually there. Well, I don't know about that. To be perfectly blunt, we're not even the most sophisticated creatures on the earth when it comes to that. And I'm going to give you a good example in the next slide. Meet our dear friend, the mantis shrimp. Quite possibly one of the most amazing creatures God has ever created. These things are incredible. They are a dazzling marine crustacean known for its extraordinary vision, lightning fast punch. It's not really a shrimp, which is kind of the word we've used for it, but it's a distant cousin. These creatures come in two main types: smashers, which wield club-like appendages to break shells with the force of a bullet, and spearers, which use spiny limbs to impale prey. They can actually shoot out a jet of water out of their mouth that will be traveling at such a speed it'll boil the ocean water around it. I mean, these things are ferocious. I mean, you want to be, I've always, in every prayer manual I've ever read, it always says, every day you should be thankful. You should give God thanks for something. Well, here's something we should all be thankful for, that these little, mantis shrimp are only about an inch long. Because if, let's say, they were the size of a cow, well, I doubt we'd be the dominant species on the earth. I mean, these things are killers. I mean, they are just incredibly dangerous little animals. They're amazing. But the one thing I really want to point out that's relevant to this conversation is that look at their eyes. These are the most sophisticated eyes of any animal known on the planet Earth. I mean, it can see in 360 degrees at one time. Human beings have color receptors on their eyes. I think they can perceive 3 or 4 cones, different colors. And then through those, we make up all the oranges and the purples. Mantis shrimp have 18. So they're a multiple factor of sophistication as far as what they can perceive in their eyes. They can see ultraviolet light. They can see infrared. They can see in the dark. I mean, they're amazing, these things. Now, here's the reason, in case you thought, did this accidentally turn into some sort of Animal Planet podcast? No, it's not that. But here's my point. If a mantis shrimp sees something, with those eyes, in its perception, how do you think it's going to perceive an object as opposed to you? My gut tells me the mantis shrimp's perception of the world and what it sees is probably a lot more detailed and accurate, because it's seeing in all these different colors that we can't perceive. It's perceiving things in infrared and ultraviolet. It can see in the dark. We can't do any of that. So we are limited not only by our language and our culture, but just by our physical limitations on being able to describe what we're actually perceiving. And that, I think, is part of what's going on when we are dealing with these throne room visions of things that are just indescribable. St. Paul, in his letter to the Corinthians, 1 Corinthians, put it perfectly, and I think it's relevant to this conversation when talking about heaven and God. However, as it is written, no eye has seen, nor ear has heard, no mind has conceived what God has prepared for those who love him. I also think that means that we can't possibly conceive of what the reality of God truly is in its full force. We're going to be limited. So that is always a point of humility that we need to remember when reading some of these texts. Sorry this episode is going long. You're probably well into your second cup, but it's a lot to cover today. And so I'm going to briefly touch on this. This is going to be something that's going to come up over the next couple weeks. But this is another mind-blowing fact that is going to play into what we're going to talk about. If you were to ask 100 Christians, what was the fall? 99 of them, will say, oh, well, that's the Garden of Eden, when Adam and Eve sinned and Eve took the apple, and that's the fall. And that was a fall. There's actually two other falls that have a significance. The second fall is the Genesis 6 story, which we will eventually get to, and it's going to take up a whole podcast, I'm sure. That's where the sons of God saw the daughters of men and saw that they were beautiful, and they came and had sex with these women, and that's where the Nephilim came from, and that's where the flood, that was the precipitating event to the flood to destroy the earth. And then the third fall, that almost never really gets talked about. And in fact, the only time you really hear it talked about is usually like something like Vacation Bible School. But it's a big deal, and it relates to this divine council, the Tower of Babel. What we're going to talk about over the next couple weeks is each one of these falls is a combination of a human fall and a spiritual fall. In the Garden of Eden, you had Adam and Eve sinned, they're humans, and you have the snake, or the Nakash, which is a spiritual being. He fell. In the Genesis 6 story, you have a twin human and spiritual rebellion. And in the Tower of Babel, you also had a twin rebellion. The humans who tried to build the tower to bring God down to them, and then also later, a spiritual rebellion that came from God scattering humans over the earth and assigning spiritual beings to watch over them, and then them rebelling. So that's what's coming up over the next couple of weeks, but I just thought I'd briefly talk about it. So when we jump in next week, you'll at least be a little prepared. And next week, we're going to probably do the fall slightly out of order. We're going to start with the last one, the Tower of Babel. And the reason is it relates to this divine council issue we've been talking about, and the angelic realm. I'll put it this way. It will be a lot different for a lot of you, most likely, than what you normally think of with the Tower of Babel. And it isn't just that God hates skyscrapers. There's a lot going on here. So that'll be next week. Sorry I ran a little long this week, but it was a big topic. We had to cover, Our Lady of Fatima, the third secret, the three secrets. We even got into mantis shrimp. So we went all in. So I'll see you next week. Goodbye. Thank you for spending your Saturday morning with us. Next week, we'll we'll be exploring yet another hero from our Christian past. So be sure to tune in. Until then, keep your faith warm, your cappuccino hot and frothy, and have a great week. See you next week for another Saturday Cappuccino with the Saints.